So, all right, part two. I paused, and then because I was going up a hill and I just couldn't talk anymore. I'm still going up a hill, but it's gotten a bit more reasonable. To get home from Resilience, I either have to go up Atwater and Côte-des-Neiges or up the mountains of Westmount. I chose the Westmount way, even though it kind of bugs me to see all these huge houses while there are people living in poverty. And I'm sure not. There's some nice people living in Westmount, I'm sure. But as I've ranted before, the distribution of wealth is very uneven. And I know that for a lot of folks, it's inherited wealth. Anyway, I'm not going to go there today. So what I was saying when I left off is that there was a great vibe behind the scenes at Resilience Montreal, and I encourage you to, follow them online. And if you're able to help, even for donations and stuff, especially, winter's coming. They're going to need a lot of winter boots, pants, warm pants, winter jackets, hats, gloves, things like that. So if you have spare stuff kicking around, instead of taking it to Salvation Army or something, I would invite you to consider bringing them to Resilience Montreal. And if you don't have a way of getting stuff down there, every now and then I do pickups. So in the spring I did a couple of pickups where I would pick a day and go around collecting stuff, donations of food, big batches of food like chili and clothing, and bring it down. So today I had said yesterday that I would talk about the concept of genocide today, but that's a big topic, and we're between the two videos already almost at 8 minutes. So I guess what I'll do to just wrap this up is just tie this in, the work of these organizations like the Native Women's Shelter and Resilience and the Native Friendship Center, all these organizations that support Indigenous folks in the city. It's tied into stuff I've been talking about in terms of land theft and systemic racism. Not all Indigenous people who live in urban centers are, poor or dealing with different issues, but and not all of them are homeless, obviously, and not all homeless people are Indigenous. But we do see high rates of homelessness, and when you think about it, people on their own ancestral territories being homeless, how can that be, right? And sometimes they're not on their home territory, sometimes they've migrated here from very far north. And sometimes people, I don't want to perpetuate stereotypes about life in Indigenous communities. Obviously I haven't been to all of them, but we often hear about the negative stuff with high rates of intoxication and violence and stuff like that. And there's something to that, but as I've mentioned and plenty of Indigenous people discuss, is that these are direct results of colonialism. So centuries of displacement, attempted assimilation, residential schools, 60s scoop. So, when people just hear about the rates of, all the problems, it can be tempting to think, well, what's wrong with them? And there's nothing wrong with them. It's really anywhere in the world that you go where people have been subject to colonialism or other kinds of oppression, you see this. Of course, at the same time, I always feel like you really need to point out that yes, people are resilient, and there are plenty of people who are doing some amazing things in their communities, and that includes the urban communities, like the one in Tiohtià:ke or Montreal. So instead of people who want to support, instead of taking on this white savior mentality of I'm gonna go help the natives, just find out what it is that Indigenous organizations are asking from you. If it's helping to set up a space for an event and move chairs around and sweep the floors and, you know, help chop vegetables or watch kids while the parents have a meeting or do whatever it is they need to do to organize, then that's what it is. It's not about seeking glory. You might not ever be seen. It's not about that. So folks who have this hero complex and they want to be seen, that winds up being really problematic, and people see through that. So so tomorrow I'll talk a little bit more then about this idea of genocide, and I'll refer back to a couple of years ago when the report from the Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women came out, and the uproar that it caused when they actually used the term genocide, because before that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission said cultural genocide. You know, they went a bit softer, but this other report, man, they were, you know, not minced words. So we'll talk a little bit about that and see why the term is applicable. And again, as I always say, my disclaimer, I'm not making any of this stuff up. This is all stuff I've learned by listening and reading, listening to and reading the words of Indigenous, you know, artists, educators, activists, you name it. So that's it for today. I'll include the link to Resources on Resilience Montreal for those who are interested. And see you tomorrow.